Hello, my name is Michaela, and I'm here to talk about my personal experience on what living as a man for 4 years of my life has taught me. Now, the first point that I have written down is men and women are not as different as we think. I've noticed a huge division with men and women, and I've experienced socially being on both sides of this, where men feel like women are too picky. They won't date a guy who isn't at least 5'11", which I will say there is a lot of truth to that. We have all these misconceptions based off of a small percentage of the population that everyone is like that. So, for instance, if you are a woman who has been sexually harassed by a man, you might think all men sexually harass women. And there are so many of these things in society where we associate men as being unapologetic, unfeeling, like they can't listen, they just talk. Or men feel like women do all the talking and that's why they never have to listen. There's just like all this misconstrued like nonsense where it's like we're all human at the end of the day. We all have emotions. And that goes to my second point of men are treated like they don't have feelings. I've experienced this myself, where before I had transitioned as male, I was living as a girl, right? And if I was seen crying somewhere, if I was struggling, there was always someone to help me. But as soon as I looked and sounded like a man, when I was crying out in public, people would walk past me. They don't care. People wouldn't even help me get my car stuck out of the snow. Such a simple thing. I just needed one person to push my car. Nobody would come to help me. I've experienced it for myself, that men are basically treated like they don't have feelings, or they are shamed for having feelings. And men and women feel just as much as each other. Women tend to be more intuitive, they tend to be more in touch with their emotions. It's just one of those natural differences between male and female, man and woman. But again, that's not 100% true. There are women out there who are stronger than men. There are men out there who are more intuitive than women. Generally speaking, women are the more intuitive sex. They are the more emotionally mature sex. That doesn't mean that a man can't be emotionally mature and shouldn't strive to be. That doesn't mean that a man shouldn't receive emotional fulfillment. That doesn't mean that a man doesn't have dreams and ambitions of his own that go beyond the material. That doesn't mean a man doesn't want a romantic, loving connection. Men want those things too. Men are not emotionless blocks. Men are not supposed to be that way. And it is not attractive to us women when a man has no emotions. It is completely unattractive when a man feels nothing but anger. I want a man to actually cry on my shoulder, to actually open up to me. That is attractive because that is a real man, a man who actually feels his emotions. Society needs to stop shaming men for feeling. It is the most beautiful part of them. Now on to my third point. Men act completely different around women. I'd noticed before, like once people started seeing me as a man, it was like they treated me completely different. Calling me bro like 9 times, fist bumping me, being like, I got you, bro. I got you. Someone calling me homie who I don't even know. It's just like there's this whole like bro community thing in men that women don't participate in. And it's just so bizarre. Like, to hear a man open up about his sex life to me, to have men make like sex jokes with me, having no idea that I am female, it was quite interesting, to say the least. And at the time, I'm like, well, I have a male brain, so of course I think like they do. But I still don't have a penis. I never had a penis. And so when they're talking about things that involve penises, yeah, I don't really get it. But it was very insightful for me to understand men in a deeper way. And that gets me into another tangent that's not on this list, but there's a lot of uh, misinterpretation of boners. A lot of women assume that if a man has a boner, it's because he is sexualizing you, which is not necessarily the case. Sometimes men get boners for literally no reason. It's blood flowing to a certain bodily organ. It could be caused by lots of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that that man is sexualizing anyone or anything around him. Especially boys going through puberty. Men should not be shamed for having boners in public. Like, yeah, men should be shamed for sexualizing people in really disgusting, uncomfortable ways, but boners are not necessarily sexual. They are just the sex organ doing what it does. It's just as natural as women menstruating. Boners and menstruating are two sides of the same coin. We should not be shamed for either of those things. It's something all of our bodies do because our bodies want to procreate. It is a normal, natural occurrence, and we should not be shaming men for something their bodies do on their own. Now, on to the next point. Men have a hard time finding romantic relationships and intimate connections. I have personally experienced that to be true. When I was perceived as a man, however, it was easier for me to be in relationships with men. But it was harder for me to be in relationships with women. So, being a man doesn't necessarily make it harder to be in a relationship, but it does make it harder to be in a relationship with a woman. Because men have more testosterone. Testosterone is what makes us horny. So, men are generally hornier. It makes sense why they would want to have sex more. And it would be easier to have that experience with someone else who is also male. It makes sense on easiness. And it also makes sense as to why women find it easier to say no. So much so to the point where it's become extreme. Again, with women saying that I can't be with a man who's not at least this tall. To me, that's like, well, what happens if you fall in love with somebody who is 1 inch shorter than that? Oh, sorry, love can't get in the way of my ideals. Like, to me, that's just ridiculous. Am I not going to date a man because he's black? No. I don't care what someone's height is. I don't care what someone's race is. That shouldn't matter. Why should that ever matter? Like, don't date a guy because he's abusive. Don't date a guy because he can't even remember your name and you've met him 5 times now. There are lots of reasons to say no to a guy. Saying no to a guy for things that he can't control about his physical state is probably ridiculous. If you're saying no to him because he's impotent, okay, I could understand that. But generally speaking, if you're saying no because of his physical appearance, that is kind of messed up. In fact, it's really messed up. I've never dated someone based off their physical appearance. I date people for who they are on the inside, for how they're going to treat me, for what they have to offer, for how I feel about them. What does their height have anything to do with that? So I can really understand why men think it's so hard to find a woman, so hard to find a girl who wants to be with him. I can understand that because I have seen it for myself. I have tried dating apps as a man. And yes, I had a much, much easier time when I went on there as a woman. So much easier. So many more guys would message me and talk to me. Girls usually wouldn't get past the first message. If they even messaged me, I would get so many more likes as a girl. The dating scene is easier as a female, unless you are gay. I don't know if the lesbian scene is necessarily easier than the gay male scene. I wouldn't know. But on to my next point. Women treat themselves as victims and see men as the bad guy, or simply as ignorant children. So, some men are seen as terrible, horrible people, and some men are seen as completely ignorant and they haven't become horrible yet. I have been one of these women. I know from personal experience that this is entirely true. I used to think all men were bad, that all men were sexist, all men wanted to rape and abuse women, or just suppress them and use them. I once used to think like this. Why? Because I had one bad traumatic experience that taught me that this is reality. The truth is, it's not reality. There are lots of good men out there. And just because one man did something really horrible does not mean all men should be punished for it. That one man who did something really terrible should be punished for it. There are good men in the world. I have met good men and I have met terrible men. I've been naked in private hot springs with 5 naked men at the same time. Nothing happened to me because they were all not interested in doing something to me. Not all men are terrible people. Some men are just men. Or should I say just human? Okay. Even with testosterone, my body didn't function completely like a man's. This is something that I think should be very apparent for many, many reasons. I never got taller than 5 feet, okay? Testosterone, after you've already hit puberty, is not going to get you to be any taller. My shoulders are not going to be any broader. My hips are still going to be female hips, no matter how much fat is on them. The fat was redistributed. But the bone structure is exactly the same as a female's because I was born female. There are things you cannot change about your body. There are things that are permanent, things that are unchangeable, like your height and your bone structure. And I could tell that when I worked at a factory, I could do a lot better than I once was before I was on testosterone, with lifting and working hard, having lots of energy, but not nearly as much as a male. When it comes to physical labor, men and women are not equals. We are different. Women have a higher endurance. They can hold things longer. Men are physically stronger. And they are taller. They can generally reach things much higher. They can generally pick up things much heavier. And I should not be treated like a man. And it was actually dangerous for me to be treated as a man at work because I'm not male. I should be treated as a female employee. I do not have the physique that a man has, and no amount of testosterone could change that. I might be able to grow a little more muscle because of the testosterone, that doesn't mean I have the build of a man. Like, there are differences. And if transgender people need to be a part of the Olympics, athletic sports and things, there should be a whole separate section for transgender individuals. I don't understand why that hasn't been brought up. They could easily just have their own section in the Olympics. It solves both problems. You're not suppressing people, and you're not putting people in a place where they don't exactly fit. Transgender people are not like people who haven't undergone what I call second puberty. It changes your body into something different. Some of those things are permanent, some of those things are not. For instance, now that I've stopped taking testosterone, I cannot build muscle as easily as I used to. And there's nothing about my physique that is male in any way. I can grow facial hair and I have a deep voice. That's it. Everything else about me is 100% female. Those are the two things that were very, very permanent. Okay, so on to the next point. Men do not have it easier than women, or harder. We have different struggles. You can't compare boners to menstruating. They're two completely different things. One is hard in one reason, and one is hard in another way. It's like trying to compare jelly to an apple. Jelly and apple are so different that you can't say that. You can't compare them and then expect one to struggle more than the other. They're just very, very different things. They should not be treated as the same thing. Men and women go through different struggles, and our differences should be respected. Men, you should love the fact that women have periods, because you know what? You could not get a girl pregnant if she didn't have a period. If she wasn't ovulating and she didn't have a period, you couldn't procreate with her. Men, or women, if men didn't get boners, how would a man ever get you pregnant? We have our differences so that we can create things together. Our differences are what make us two puzzle pieces that fit right into each other. Our differences should be respected and honored and loved. And I love men for the ways that they are different from me. I love when guys reach up on a high shelf to get something that I can't reach. I'm just like, yes, I didn't have to climb the shelf this time. I'm thankful for men being them who they are.